thank you all for being here on time. And so today we start our keynote session with Professor Stefania Palmisano from University of Turin and the moderator Giulia Volpi, Marie Curie scholar, how do you say, scholar?
I think both are okay. I won't get offended. Yeah.
So a global Marie Curie between Boulder and Bologna University, which is going to be moderate this session. So thank you everybody for being here today and enjoying this morning with us. Thank you.
Okay. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Stefania, who will give the plenary this morning. So Stefania Palmisano is an associate professor in the Sociology of Religion at the University of Turin. She was the coordinator of the research center CRAFT, Contemporary Religions and Faith in Transition, based at the Department of Culture, Politics and Society. She's currently the secretary of the Italian Association for the Sociology of Religion and vice director of the Masters in Religious Sciences and Intercultural Mediation. She's also the director of the degree course in Politics and Social Services, and she is a member of the teaching board of the International Joint PhD program Religion, Culture and Public Life at the University of Padua. So I wonder how you can also do all the publications you do with all those things you do. Because she also has been visiting research at Lancaster University, Boston University, Wolverhampton University, and the University College Dublin. Her research includes mainstream religions, alternative spiritualities, new religious movements, women and religion, and the relationship between spirituality and care in the Italian healthcare system. And I think we're going to hear some of that today during the presentation. She also published an endless list of titles. Some of them are Exploring New Monastic Communities, the Re-invention of Tradition. She co-edited with Isabelle Jonveaux of Monasticism in Modern Times. With Nicola Pannofino, she co-edited Invention of Tradition and Syncretism in Contemporary Religions, Sacred Creativity. And she published with Nicola Pannofino Contemporary Spirituality, Enchanted Worlds of Nature, Wellbeing and Mystery in Italy. And in 2024, she published with Alberta Giorgi Donne e Religione in Italia, Itinerari e Ricerca, which is about women and religion. So I leave the floor to Stefania, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Giulia, and thank you to the organizer for this kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you. And I would like to start from the relationship between religion, among religion, social vulnerability and resilience, because historically religious institutions, groups and practices are being used to protect vulnerable people, not only by means of the traditional religious communities, which is to say temples, churches, synagogues or mosques that brings together the faithful, but also by means of specific institutions of religious origin that have made solidarity their mission. We have to remember that many hospitals, orphanages, schools, and universities were founded by religious orders and congregations in the mid-19th century. And already 20 years ago, the American sociologist Patricia Whitberg described the evolution of these institutions, their parable, in her book entitled From Piety to Professionalism and Back, Transformations of Organized Religious Virtuosity. But still today, the social, political, cultural environment demonstrated that religions continue to play a key role in mitigating social vulnerability and in nurturing the resilience of individuals, groups, and communities. So, in other words, we can argue that vulnerability and resilience can become, under certain conditions, two sides of the same coin. While this is very well established in religion, in the matters of religion, This is not the case for the other notion involved in our conference, that of spirituality, and more specifically, the kind of spirituality that at least 50 years ago, the sociological community, the international sociological community, renamed contemporary spirituality, also alternative spirituality, as well post-Christian spirituality. And these expressions were introduced in order to indicate the search for the sacred outside the borders of traditional religions, which is to say, outside official religions, outside historical religions. Under this umbrella, phenomena such as New Age, neo-paganism, neo-shamanism, Oriental spirituality, eco-spiritualities, and the cults of the female divine have been inserted. And I would like to make an observation here that I shall dwell on it later on, but I would like to anticipate it since it's so important. These forms of spirituality have often seen as weird, awkward, bizarre, and in sociology they have been accused of being individualistic, private, narcissistic, and selfish. Selfish here means disengaged. In my talk today, I would like to demonstrate that, first of all, spirituality, on the contrary, can be a service resource for the use of both the individuals and the communities. And it is useful in order to cope with vulnerability, to come to terms with fragility, to nurture resilience. And secondly, I would like to demonstrate that spirituality can fulfill these objectives, but it does so in a different way from religion, because spirituality has its own characteristics that distinguish it from religion, as we shall see very soon. With this task in mind, I shall start from the many studies now available arguing that spirituality is a resource of meaning, is a very important resource, both to implement coping modalities in the face of dramatic events, critical events, unforeseen and unexpected events, and also to improve everyday life. So, in the absence of any dramatic event, just to improve ordinary life. So, I shall take a bit of time because I like to approach all the points above by using different supports to share with you my fieldwork on contemporary spirituality, mainly in Italy, and I'm going to use some photographs and videos. So, today I shall define contemporary spirituality and its relationship with religion, starting from the sociological debate. I shall review the criticism that some sociologists have made of contemporary spiritualities, accusing them of being individualistic, private, narcissistic, and disengaged. And I shall counter these accusations by showing that spirituality is very well engaged in mitigating social vulnerability. In order to do this, I introduce a typology of events of spirituality which I have created, and this typology reveals a phenomenology of events that have two characteristics. First of all, they impact on biographical level for individuals but also for communities, and secondly, these events can activate spirituality, both to cope with dramatic events and not to cope with dramatic events, just to cope with everyday life and improve everyday life. So, as you can see from the table, we have the use of spirituality as a coping resource or a source of meaning, and we have the social actor, which can be individual or a group. Before going on, I would like to introduce a warning, because claiming that spirituality can prove to be a service resource does not imply disregarding the fact that spiritual phenomena, like religious ones, can also generate authoritarian or violent drifts. Therefore, spirituality too can turn into an obstacle and limit the development and the potentialities of individuals and communities. I'm very aware of this. So, first of all, some definitions. I'm sorry for you, but definitions are very important, so I will start with some definitions. Because we're speaking about spirituality, but what kind of spirituality are we referring to? In order to answer this question, we have to distinguish between two kinds of spirituality: religious spirituality and extra-religious spirituality, also called contemporary spirituality in the sociological debate. So religious spirituality is just a dimension of religion, is the mystical side of every religious tradition, and we can understand religious spirituality as the intensification of religious experience within the borders of a specific religious tradition, within the framework of a specific tradition whose values are shared, are taken for granted, but are not contested. So it's the classical definition that we find in the history of religion, because every religion has a mystical side. Think about Islam, we have Sufism. Think about Hebraism, we have Kabbalah. Think about Christianity, we have many different streams of spirituality connected with monastic orders, congregations, communities, movements, and so on. Extra-religious spirituality is completely different, because here spirituality is not a dimension of religion, not at all. Spirituality here is free from the moorings of religion. And if you want, we can say that spirituality here becomes a religion itself, because it enters into competition with religion. So, contemporary spirituality is understood as something that happens outside official religions, and it is an experience of the sacred regulated by the subject. Now is the subject the real character, because the subject, according to his or her consciousness, decides what works for him or for her, and eclectically chooses and combines different paths of meanings, beliefs, and practices, usually outside official religions, but sometimes also picking and mix from traditional religions, historical religions. The sociologist, also philosopher Charles Taylor, described these sociological mechanism as the subjectivist turn of our culture. And I argue that contemporary spirituality is a very eloquent example of this subjectivist turn, because in contemporary spirituality, the source of validation of religious experience shifts from outside to the inside, which is to say, from the authority of the institutions to the authority of the subject. In other words, it is no longer the church, the parish, the congregation, the community to which one belongs that decides how to think, how to believe, how to practice, but rather the individual who embarks on a personal journey to come into contact with the sacred with the inner self, the sacred without, this is just in theory, but in theory, without the mediation of any authority other than one's own self. If we had time, we will see that the authority also in the spiritual field is very important, and also the dimension of power, but this is just in theory. Okay, some criticism, because the critics of spirituality has accused spirituality of being individualistic, private, narcissistic, and disengaged. In their words, spirituality has no social impact, because they think that spiritual seeker alone would construct and would celebrate alone is her own personal spiritual world. And according to them, in the new spiritualities, small transcendencies replace large ones. Individuals close themselves up in their personal enclosures, and so they abdicate social, civic, and political engagement. Of course, I don't agree with this point of view. My thesis is that spirituality can on the contrary, be a meaningful resource for implementing both coping and empowering actions. And to substantiate my thesis, I presented the typology. You have to remember that this typology of events impact on biographical level and activate the search for spirituality. So my typology arises by crossing two dimensions. The first dimension is the extent of the event that activates spirituality, because the event can affect an individual or a group, a community. And the second dimension is the nature of the impact of the event, because the impact can be pejorative or ameliorative. So, don't panic. Matrix is the most interesting thing that sociologists can do. They love doing matrix. So this is my matrix of spirituality. And from the intersection of these dimensions, I derived a double-entry matrix with 4 cells. In the upper quadrants, I put spirituality as a resource. In the lower quadrants, I put spirituality as source of meaning and purpose to everyday life. In the left-hand quadrants, I put the social actor as individual, and in the right-hand quadrants, the social actor is collective. So, from this intersection, we have this. This is the typology. So you can see 4 cells: illness, natural disaster, pandemics, terrorist attacks, peak experiences, and gatherings and rituals. So let us look at them in detail. The first cell is illness. And here I put the event of illness because a vast and growing international literature in the field of medical humanities shows that illness, which is a very critical event, unexpected, unforeseen, dramatic, can deconstruct the order taken for granted for a person and can bring to the surface a hidden spiritual need, from which new perspectives about life, about experience can arise. And many biomedical studies, have shown that the focus on the patient's spiritual dimension can contribute to improve the quality of life and the holistic well-being of patients, especially in the field of palliative care. So spirituality is very important, as you can see. And the importance of spirituality in clinical practices has been hugely recognized, not only by scholars, but also by professionals themselves. But we need to underline that healthcare professionals, especially nurses, address this need of spiritual care of patients and also of caregivers more on the ground of good intentions than on the basis of specific expertise and competencies. Why? This is caused by the lack of professional training programs and university courses about spiritual care and its implementation in clinical practices. Recently, in order to fill the gap, some international projects have been launched aimed at offering training programs in spiritual care, tailored for different healthcare professionals. And I would like to mention just one, because I was the principal investigator at the University of Turin, and this project is entitled From Cure to Care, Digital Education and Spiritual Assistance in Hospital Healthcare. And we were founded in 2021, and we work together with other 4 European universities, UCD, Island Extremadura, Universidad Internacional de La Rioja, and Cardinal Stefan Wyszynski in Poland. So, I would like to show you a brief video that we have realized with our partners in order to teach students some techniques to identify the spiritual need of patients. So, just a moment. Okay, you will see the second lecture, which is about compassion, which is a milestone in spiritual care. And you can see the difference between the first nurse who has not followed our course, so she does not anything about spiritual nursing care, and the second nurse who has followed the spiritual care course, so is very nice in treating and approaching the patient.
You are about to watch a simulation video of Unit 1. This unit is about understanding the concepts of compassion and presence at end-of-life care.
Hello, I'm here to your admission. Sorry, love. Who are you? I'm obviously one of the nurses working here. Nice to meet you. So there's a few things I need to check. You are Mary Murphy, and you're 65 years of age. And I assume this is your son, your next of kin.
Yes, my name's Mary, and this is John, my son. Maybe you should go.
And you have a cancer diagnosis, and you're here for your first set of treatments.
I suppose, yes. Cancer. But you never told me you had cancer. Oh, it's okay.
Oh no, what do you mean you have cancer?
It's okay, son.
You can't have.
Everything will be fine.
You never said you had cancer, Ronnie.
You'll be fine.
Well, that's not fair, Ronnie.
Now, Mr. Murphy, you need to sit down and calm down, or we will have to put you out.
Maybe you could wait outside. I'm sure there's somewhere to sit and get a cup of tea or a bun. Yeah. Nurse, John doesn't know everything. He has some mental health issues, so he needs time to adjust to what's happened with me.
That's fine, but he's of no concern to me. You're my concern. He's going to be fine. So I'm going to sort out this identity bracelet and put it on you, and I'm going to check and see where this doctor is, so that I can set you up on your first set of treatments, because I'm going off duty now in the next 15 minutes, so I need to get this sorted. Please just steady your hand here. I'm going to put this identity band on.
Okay.
Please stay steady, Mrs. Murphy, please. Now.
John! So now you're after seeing a scenario where a nurse has come to take my admission. This is the first nurse I have come across since I have arrived in hospital. So what I want you to do is to rate this nurse's level of compassion towards me as a patient the first time that she has seen me.
Hello, my name is Adam. I'm the nurse on the ward today, and I'll be looking after you. Tell me, what's your name, or what would you like to be addressed as while you're here?
Oh, well, my name's Mary, and you can call me Mary. And this is my son, John.
Well, hello, Mary. Call Mary. Hello, John. And tell me, what brings you here today, Mary?
Well, Adam, is it? Well, Adam, I haven't been well for a few weeks, and when I went to my GP, he sent me for a few tests, and the results came back saying I had a bit of cancer, but it wasn't too bad, and it would respond to treatment.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do today. John, would you maybe like to go outside, just take a break, and just get a cup of tea or something like that?
Oh, maybe, John, you could get us both a cup of tea and a bar. I'd have a purple snack. Is that okay, son?
Okay, honey.
So, have you seen the difference between before the course and after the course? So, therefore, spirituality can prove to be a meaningful resource for coping with dramatic events, and spirituality marks a turning point in people's biography, and this does not apply, however, just for individual biographies, but also for collective ones. As it happens in the cases of emergencies, such as natural disasters, pandemics, terrorist attacks. So we come to the second cell because we are coming to emergencies, and the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, is a very good example of this because it shows the clear link between crisis situations and spiritual resource. Since on the one hand we had pandemic, which intensified state of existential distress, also motivated by vaccine skepticism for religious motivations. But on the other, we had spirituality, which proved to be very useful in counteracting many different emotions, fear, anxiety, loss of hope, stress, and so on, but also was useful in mourning the loss of a family member and in fostering individual practices, such as meditating at home, doing yoga at home, learning how to relax, how to breathe, and so on. So, moving to the lower quadrants of my typology, we can find two case studies in which there are no critical events that invoke the use of spirituality as a coping resource. On the contrary, in these two case studies, spirituality became a source of meaning, a source of sense, a purpose, and more importantly, a means of empowerment. So spirituality becomes here, I coined this expression, an existence-enhancing resource. So in the third cell, I put peak experiences, which is to say events marking individual biographies and generating spiritual experiences, improving life. And these experiences, spatial experiences, can be generated, for example, by the encounter with a person, a divine force, the contact with nature, art, beauty in general, as well as by specific happenings in life. In the case of religion, we would speak without any problem of conversion, because we have here a personal experience of change triggered by the encounter with the sacred, and from which a sense of rebirth springs up. That means that we have the formation of a new self, which is completely different from the old self. But in the case of spirituality, it's not so easy to speak about conversion, because in spirituality, the transition is usually not so marked, since spiritual paths are more fluid, more complex, and more eclectic than the religious ones. One could speak about conversion all the same in a broad sense, because the basic idea remains valid, and since even in spiritual seekers' paths we can find peak experiences, extraordinary moments, transformative events, and these events mark a biographical turning point in a spiritual sense, which means that spirituality can illuminate life. And this is what our interviewees told us when we met them in our research on contemporary spirituality in Italy. We have traveled from the north to the south of the country in order to find spiritual communities, holistic practitioners, spiritual leaders, and people who define themselves spiritual but not religious. And we have reported their voices in our book, Religione sotto spirito. I put a tentative title in English, Religion in the Jar of Spirituality. I don't know if it's good. Traveling among new spiritualities in Italy, but we have a different book in English if you are interested in this topic, which is Contemporary Spiritualities, Enchanted Worlds of Nature, Wellbeing and Mystery in Italy, published with Routledge in 2020. And in this study, we have interviewed witches, druids, healers, shamans, ghost hunters, masters of meditation, mindfulness, leaders of spiritual communities, and we have called them spiritual virtuosos because despite what the critics said, for them spirituality is not just a hobby, it's not just a cultural interest. Spirituality is very important, is constitutive of their life because it offers them the key for interpreting the world, giving meaning to their work, guiding daily choices. But above all, spirituality is for them a source of emancipation and an empowering tool. And they say that spirituality encourages personal changes as the best way to transform the world outside. So they think that spirituality can become a process of empowerment, and they describe this empowerment in many different ways. For example, they say bringing light first to oneself and then to the world, or listening to the inner voice in order to authentically know oneself and act with self-awareness in the world outside. And these experiences of empowerment are also stronger in a group. Think about how many spiritual groups are engaged in social, civic, political engagement, political struggles. Do you remember when the critic says spirituality is disengaged? Is not true. I put here just an example, the Temple of Witchcraft, which is a current of neo-paganism. Neo-paganism is also in Italy very widespread today. I'm going to publish a book in September about neo-witchcraft in Italy, and it's impressive because this phenomenon is increasing a lot, and in this case they are fighting for the rights of LGBTQI+ people, the rights of animals, and also the rights of indigenous people. To come to the last one, spirituality can also be a source of improvement in the life of a group, and so a vector of collective transformations. And this happens in the gatherings and rituals, so the fourth cell, but I argue that there is a particular form of gatherings in which the process of collective transformations is even more impactful, which are the intentional communities, to use Miller's definition, because communities propose a stable and continuous life experience, and they ask their members a more intense form of involvement, which is based on the sharing of resources, practices, and values. And in Italy, we have this network, which is called RIVER, the Italian Ecological Villages Networks, that currently gathers around 70 communities, intentional communities. Most of them have a secular approach, but some of them have a spiritual afflatus. They propose what I called eco-spirituality because they combine eco-sustainability with spiritual beliefs and practices. And I would like to conclude my presentation by sharing with you a video of one of the most important spiritual communities, which is based in Italy, but in my opinion is one of the most important in Europe, as some authors said, in the world, which is Damanhur. I wrote this book about Damanhur with my colleague Nicola Pannofino at the University of Turin. Damanhur, an esoteric community open to the world with Palgrave, and I've been studying Damanhur for 20 years. And so I can argue that among spiritual, magical, and esoteric communities, Damanhur is one of particular interest because of its history. It was founded at the end of the 70s, and it's very well known all around the world because of its underground temple, which is huge. It is deep as a building of as deep as a building of 11 grounds, 11 floors, And the dimensions of Damanhur are also important. In the headquarters, more than 400 Damanhurians live together, and also the complexity of his social, cultural, political life, which have triggered many different processes of collective engagement, especially in the field of environment. So, before showing the video, just a few words of introduction. Damanhur is situated in Val Chiusella in the Piedmont region, northwestern Italy, where I live. And one of the first rules of Damanhurians is that of giving up the baptismal name when entering the community and taking a new one. And this symbolically marks the beginning of a new life. Interestingly, the name or their new names pay tribute to the animal and vegetable kingdoms. This is why in the video we shall meet Damanhurians such as orangutan rice or ibex peach or ant corianders and many others. So it's very difficult to explain the complexity of Damanhur in a few minutes, so I leave the video to introduce the community to you. Just a word, this is a trailer for an episode about Damanhur that is now available on Amazon Prime if you want to watch it, and to which I have collaborated as a researcher. And it was produced by Travel Media House. So thank you very much for your attention, and now we will watch the documentary. I need to find it. Oh. Yes? Oh, yes, sorry.
We were the Swedish girls, and we wanted to do a trip together, to go somewhere in the world. And I searched community in Italy, and I found the page of Damanhur, and felt like, you know, we should go there, we should check this place out, see what it's about.
I can say I was looking for a spiritual path, but as I knew Damanhur, I was very involved in this idea.
But I had no idea when I came that it was a very complex reality. I just thought it was an eco-community where people were growing vegetables, and that was it.
So I turned on the TV, and there was this woman that was speaking about a man, very gentle, with these two beautiful eyes, very magnetic eyes.
And everybody was constantly talking about Fargo. You heard stories, and you heard teachings, and you heard all kinds of things about him all the time.
He had a message from the universe, and he was a human being, but a human being with some special characteristics.
And it has been the one that convinced us that we can dream together and we can achieve even impossible dreams.
I really felt that there was something that I wasn't seeing. You know, there were secrets or things that I couldn't take part of. All these amazing people that really brought you into their homes, but there were also big walls, and you couldn't see through those. And if you tried, you know, they wouldn't let you.
We were creating something that before didn't exist and that nobody could imagine.
So I really thought that I wanted to do something important for the world and in the world, and do that together with other people and really create a new way of living.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Stefania. I think this was an excellent presentation, and it's also really fitting for the topic of this conference. So I took a lot of notes, and I would like to make some comments and sort of like put together what Stefania was saying. First of all, I think you did a great job in demonstrating how spirituality, despite some criticism of being narcissistic and selfish, it's actually a great source for individuals and communities. Now, while you were talking, I noted down some of the keywords, and I would like to go through them. I think you said very, very well a couple of dichotomies that I see as central in your work. And the first one is religion and spirituality, and the second one is vulnerability and resilience. And those when I say dichotomy, I do not mean that those are mutually exclusive, but rather that there are terms that we can see in conversation with each other and that we can critically evaluate to understand contemporary religion. I would like also to get into another dichotomy, which I think it was perhaps the most prominent in this presentation, which is the tension or perhaps the interaction between community and the individual. And I think this was key, especially considered how Stefania talked about the criticism to spirituality as being excessively individualistic. And actually, I believe that not only in these specific case studies that were presented, but when we talk about contemporary religion or religion in general, we always have to consider the individual and the community, because I do not think that one thing exists without the other. And when I talk about community, I think it's also important to consider institutions. So of course, there are some communities that are spontaneous, that are gatherings, but also there are some communities that are closely tied to institutions. And another dichotomy I would like to mention in my response is that between coping and empowering. And I think that the typology that Stefania presented, where she discussed about illness and natural disasters, peak experiences, and collective transformations, are actually very good to illustrate this dichotomy. So on the one hand, we have coping. So when something difficult happens, then how do people engage in spiritual or religious practices? And therefore, spirituality can help them with coping. And on the other hand, we have empowering, but also being a source of meaning. So when people can find something more for their lives or their communities through an engagement with spirituality. So also in this case, I think that the two terms are closely related. So you cope and you become empowered. And empowerment also comes from people who overcame difficult situations. And here I also would like to mention, commenting on the first video that Stefania showed us. And by the way, I really love the videos. And I think we can mention that the second one, you said it's on Amazon Prime, right? So I'm doing a bit of publicity here. Commenting on the first video, I think in some contexts, and perhaps some of you are familiar with that, there are people in hospitals which are there for the spiritual care of people. In Italy, we mostly have people from the Catholic tradition because that's the majority of the country. But I know in the US, there are hospitals where there are chaplains that are sort of like trained to address spiritual needs more generally. But I think this is a very revolutionary perspective because we are not talking about pastoral care or people who are trained to address spirituality, but rather spirituality, I would say, as a way of just being kind and caring with others. And I think this is a key way of seeing spirituality. And so I explored some of the key terms of this presentation. And I would like to briefly mention two other terms that perhaps were not prominent in this presentation, but that are relevant in my work, and I know that are also important for what Stefania does. The first one is gender, and the second one is media. So when we talk about gender, immediately, also in the first video about the two nurses, I noticed how the first one is a woman and the second one is a man. And I really liked that they did not pick two women, because that's kind of like the stereotype of the nurses being women. But also, we know that a lot of family care, community care, and spiritual labor is outsourced to women in many traditions. And this is something really, really embedded in our culture. So I always see women being nice and kind and tending to the sick, but also being the ones discussing spiritual needs. But this is not necessarily what society needs or how society functions, especially when we are all individuals that potentially will need help and care, and we are all in communities that should stand for our needs. So I think that this is a good example to think about how gender dynamics and power dynamic can also have a place when we talk about the use of spirituality. And perhaps spiritualities that are not tied to specific institutions can also help gender roles to become a little bit more fluid and people to assume different caring roles. And the second term I would like to mention is that of media. Now, commenting on the second video that we watched, some of the participants were mentioned, I looked for communities in Italy, or there was another woman saying, I turned on the TV and there was a person speaking. And of course, a lot of the spiritualities like those that Stefania described are not very visible in society. But the more and more we live in an interconnected world, the more actually it's easier for people to reach out new knowledge and to become connected. So I think that in here, it's really important to think about media as a place where both individual and communities can find a place to discuss forms of spiritualities, practices, rituals, and gatherings that are not necessarily hosted by institutional religions. But also media can become a way of giving new knowledge and also readdressing discourses about, for instance, spirituality. And in this sense, I really wanted to mention media also because you have produced media to actually talk about your project, but those were media for everybody to consume, like either for healthcare practitioners to learn how to better cope with something, with illness and helping people, but also the Damanhur video, the Damanhur documentary is something that you have produced to sort of like help people know a phenomenon that I don't know how many of you knew of Damanhur, but is not widely known in Italy, and I assume also worldwide, remains particularly niche. So I think, okay, and also I want to promote Alessandra's book on Damanhur in case. Thanks. With that, I am very aware that I stand between you and coffee. So I...
Se ne raccogliamo una ma non rispondiamo, c'è più un momento di confronto e poi al coffee saremo noi disponibili.
What I would like to do now, because Stefania was suggesting, perhaps we don't have much time for questions, but I'm happy to collect questions and maybe we can first go through all the questions and then we can all go and get a coffee and address them. So we can sort of like have an ongoing discussion. Would that be okay with you?
Wonderful.
Okay. So is there any question? I don't know how it, okay, so.
I invite people to come there to make the question.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
wonderful, very interesting talk. I would like to ask you, because you mentioned that you worked through Italy, like in all parts, so I would like to ask you if you notice some differences between North Italy, different regions, regarding alternative contemporary spirituality groups.
Okay, I think this was a very good question, and now I'm also curious about the answer.
Thanks, Stefania. Amazing. My question is specifically about Burma. Why it is not considered a religion, considering it is a built-in community, it is going on for a while, so where do you draw the line?
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. Your initial comments, first of all, I do not share the negative rendition of contemporary spirituality, as you have said it. But I'm curious, when you say that me, myself, at the core of my individuality, I give meaning to my spirituality. But I'm asking, as you said that, I was asking, so we make meaning. Meaning making is not an insular reality. It's within the social world. Even when the subject arises, it operates within the social world because it's going to derive the vocabularies and the meaning that social world has given to that. How do you breach that? Because to a certain extent, you have not yet addressed the dualism that that plays out between the we and the I. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes,
Good.
A lot.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth mentioning that religion and spirituality, of course, can get different meanings depending on the context. So clearly this was about the Italian context, which is a Western European context. And I do not think that necessarily people's understanding of spirituality is homogeneous all around the world. But nonetheless, I think that the presentation can give some food for thought about the relationship between religion and spirituality. So.
Okay, thank you very much for your great presentation. I would like to ask about the conceptualization of the extra religious spirituality that you talked about, because my research is focused how spirituality helps with issues of meaning and meaningfulness. Sorry?
Spirituality helps what?
How spirituality influences sources of meaning and meaningfulness, and also at least in martial arts. So I would like to ask you about how you conceptualize the spirituality that is not connected to the religion, and on which base you created this model behind meaning. Thank you very much. I hope it's understandable.
Yeah, and I think this is also a great question for discussion, perhaps also during the coffee breaks, because I think that there's many examples that can be used to answer. And so I have a question.
Thank you so much for a great presentation. It got me thinking about, the sociological critiques of the individual spirituality, but also one could argue the critique of the institutional religious. Like, I'm from the US, so we have, I think, a dominant religious institution that one could say is very selfish towards its in-group and very aggressive. So, is there a way to judge that? I would say, in my view, that there's a loss of spirituality in a genuine sense. Could you address that, please?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's interesting when we talk about the US case, because there's also not all religious institutions, right, but some that have also a for-profit engagement, which could be media production, which could be selling of goods and so on. So maybe that's also something to consider in that sense. Yeah. I think we can take the last one and then we move on to the coffee, and Stefania will be then
available,
surrounded by all of the people who want to know about that.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, I'm not a academia, I'm just a construction man. So I visited also the European Religion Conference in Austria. A similar thing, I heard many discussions that what you presented for the medical doctors and this, psychiatrists. So they are also wondering. But I don't see you guys bring science into the religion. We are at a crossroad where actually we can actually push humanity into next dimension. And spirituality, especially in India, is very, very rich. And if you take certain those ideas and apply here, you will get wonders, because you guys have fantastic research, capabilities, and also, which I am certainly not in this field, but I try to create. I actually have, for the past 10 years, tried to create and bring a solution by integrating science into spirituality through my project management skills, that how we can live happily using science, spirituality and religion teachings. So it is just a comment from my side that I don't see the scientific aspect. And science, at this moment, they have beautiful theories. The two grand theories of science, general relativity, quantum mechanics, beautifully tested, but they are not integrated. And the physicists all over the world are struggling to just connect it. And spirituality definitely helps. And I have found a way that how it can be. It is in ancient teachings in the Vedic, and perhaps this Penzia University, because it is one of the largest and oldest, and I came here only to convey this message that I have seen Rome so much of rich in history and culture. Why don't these things spread from here? So this is my workshop today also, but I wish I could see more of scientific ideas bring into spirituality, because spirituality is scientific.
I try to demonstrate it. So I will be available. Thank you very much. I will start from the last question, which is the most difficult. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Lo prendi tu il costruttore?
No, cioè non so cosa dire.
No, ma scherzo, figurati neanche.
Comunque molto bella la presentazione.